The scratched jar and the silent wish in a small town surrounded by rolling hills and fading railway tracks. There lived a quiet boy named Liam. He was 9 years old, thin as a pencil, and full of wonder that he rarely let anyone see. His shoes had holes. His backpack was too big for his shoulders, and his clothes were always a little too old to be in fashion. But Liam didn't complain. He was the kind of child who found treasure in forgotten places and hope in moments that others might overlook. He lived with his mother, a single parent who worked double shifts at the town diner and still managed to tuck him in every night with a kiss and a smile that tried to hide how tired she really was. Liam had one dream, a dream that sat quietly on a shelf in the toy store 2 blocks from his school. It was a custom-built motorcycle model kit, bright red with chrome details, and it came in a shiny box that made it look like it had its own heartbeat. The toy wasn't just plastic and pieces to Liam. It was freedom. It was imagination. It was something that felt just out of reach, like a star you could almost touch if you climbed high enough. The price was printed clearly on the box, $39.99. To most people, that wasn't much. To Liam, it was a mountain, so he started saving. Every coin he found on the sidewalk, every tip he earned from helping old Mr. Benson mow his lawn, every spare dollar his mom slipped him when she could, he put it all into an old glass jar he kept hidden behind a stack of books. The jar had a big scratch down the middle and used to hold pickles. Now it held dreams. Each night Liam would count the money, whispering the total to himself like a prayer. $17.65. $22.30. He didn't tell his classmates because most of them wouldn't understand. Some would tease him. Others would ask why he didn't just get a phone or a game like everyone else. But Liam didn't care about phones or games. He cared about building something with his own hands, watching it come together piece by piece like his life. On Fridays after school, Liam would press his nose to the toy store window, staring at the red box like it was a lighthouse. The man behind the counter, Mr. Harlan, noticed him every week. He was a grumpy old fellow with thick glasses and a permanent frown, but over time something in his face softened when he saw Liam. He'd tap the glass, raise an eyebrow, and mutter through the door, "Still saving, huh?" And Liam would smile, nod, and hold up the jar proudly. The jar was still only half full, but Liam believed. He truly believed. But one afternoon, something changed. Liam was walking home, his jar carefully wrapped in an old t-shirt and tucked into his backpack, when he passed by a crowd forming outside the diner. Cars lined the street. People were gathering with cameras and phones, whispering and buzzing like bees around a hive. Curious, Liam tiptoed closer, slipping between legs and shopping bags until he reached the front of the crowd. And then he saw him. Keanu Reeves, standing on the sidewalk, dressed in jeans and a weathered black jacket, shaking hands, smiling softly, and talking in that calm voice that didn't need to shout to be heard. He was filming something in town, someone said, a movie. But Liam didn't care about the cameras or the crew. He just watched Keanu as if he was seeing a character from one of his dreams walk into the real world. Keanu's eyes scanned the crowd, polite but distant, until they landed on Liam. For a brief second, the world slowed. Keanu tilted his head as if recognizing something deeper in the boy's eyes. He smiled, raised his hand in a small wave. Liam, startled, stepped back and nearly dropped his backpack. The jar clinked inside. Keanu noticed the sound. His brow furrowed with curiosity. Before anyone could stop him, Keanu moved through the crowd and knelt beside Liam. "Hey there," he said gently. "What's in the bag?" Liam, wide-eyed and trembling, whispered, "My dream." The crowd chuckled, but Keanu didn't. He smiled softly as if he understood more than they could guess. "Can I see it?" Liam nodded, unzipped the bag, and pulled out the scratched glass jar. The coins inside shimmered faintly in the afternoon light. Keanu took it in his hands, careful not to smudge the glass. He turned it slowly, reading the sticker on the side. It said "for the bike" in childlike handwriting. Keanu looked back at the boy. "You saving for a real bike?" Liam shook his head. "Just a toy. In the shop. Red one, with silver wheels. But it's more than a toy to me." Keanu nodded slowly, as if he understood. Sometimes the things other people call small are the biggest things in the world. Then a voice from the crowd yelled, "Hey Keanu, come back, we need the next shot." A production assistant waved nervously, trying not to rush him but clearly under pressure. Keanu stood, handed the jar back and placed a hand gently on Liam's shoulder. "Keep saving," he said. "You're doing something a lot of people forget how to do. You're believing." And with that, he walked back to the crew, leaving, behind a boy who felt like something incredible had just happened, but he couldn't explain what or why. The next day, Liam went back to the toy store. But something was wrong. The red motorcycle was gone. He rushed inside, panicked, nearly dropping the jar. "Mr. Harlan, where's the red bike?" The old man looked at him sadly. "Sold it this morning. Someone came in early and bought it right off the shelf." Liam's chest fell. The jar in his hands felt heavier than ever. All those weeks, all that effort, and it was gone. He didn't cry. He just nodded, whispered thank you, and walked back to the front window. The shelf where the red box used to sit looked empty now, not just in space but in spirit. He sat on the sidewalk, the jar between his feet, his head resting against the window, trying to understand why the world could be so cruel. And then a shadow appeared beside him, not loud, not dramatic, just a shadow. Liam looked up and froze. Keanu Reeves was standing there. But he wasn't holding a toy, he was holding something else. The gift that wasn't wrapped. Keanu Reeves stood under the quiet morning sky, holding an object that didn't sparkle, didn't come in a shiny box, and didn't make any noise. It was a soft leather pouch, aged and worn with a simple string tied around it like someone had used it for years but never let it go. Liam sat frozen on the sidewalk, his scratched jar still between his sneakers, the emptiness in his chest, heavier than the weight of coins he had collected for months. He had prepared himself for disappointment when he saw the toy was gone, but he hadn't prepared for this. For the man from the movies, the man who had spoken to him like no one else had in a long time, to come back at all, let alone with something unexpected. Keanu knelt beside him, placing the pouch on the ground gently as if it held something delicate, maybe even sacred. "I saw you yesterday," he said in that calm, steady voice. "You reminded me of someone I used to be." Liam glanced at him, his eyes still wide with confusion. "I just wanted the red bike." Keanu smiled, not with pity, but with warmth. "I know, and you were almost there. The way you saved, worked, believed, that matters. It really does. It tells me you're not just a kid who wants things. You're someone who values them, and that's rare." He pushed the pouch toward Liam. "I want to give you something. But it's not the toy." Liam stared at it, then slowly opened the pouch with trembling fingers. Inside was a small wooden box, carved with gentle curves and smooth edges. He opened it and found a miniature silver key resting on a velvet cloth. Next to it, folded neatly, was a handwritten note. Liam picked it up and began to read. "Dear Liam, sometimes the things we think we want most are only leading us to something better. You came to buy a bike. I came to meet someone who reminded me why I keep believing in people. I've left something for you. Something real. Something you'll have to build, not with glue or plastic, but with your heart, your mind, and your kindness. Follow the address below. Go with your mom. Take the jar with you. You'll know what to do when you get there." Liam's lips moved slowly as he reread the words. He didn't understand all of it yet, but there was something in the letter that sparked a warmth he hadn't felt since his father left, a kind of hope that wasn't built on buying things but on being seen. He looked up at Keanu, who was now standing again, watching the boy carefully. "What's at the address?" Liam asked. Keanu shook his head. "That's for you to find out." Liam stood, dusted off his pants, and looked down at the scratched jar. "Should I bring the money?" Keanu nodded. "Bring everything, it's part of the story now." He turned to leave but paused. "I'll be there when you arrive, but only for a little while. The rest is yours." Then he walked away, disappearing into a crowd that didn't recognize what had just happened. A quiet moment, a soft gift, and a shift in a child's world. 2 hours later, Liam and his mother drove out of town in their old car, the kind that made funny noises when it turned too fast and had a heater that only worked on one side. The note said to go to a nearby address just off Highway 18, near an old train yard that most people didn't visit anymore. The road was rough, lined with weeds and broken fences, and Liam's mother kept glancing at the directions as if they had to be wrong. "You sure this is it, honey?" Liam nodded, holding the box and pouch on his lap. He said I'd know, and then they saw it. A small garage, white with red trim, with a wide sliding door and a dusty window that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. But outside, parked neatly in front, was a real motorcycle. Not a toy, not a replica. A real one. It was black and silver with sleek lines and polished chrome, and beside it stood Keanu, arms crossed, smiling like a man who had just handed someone the world. Liam and his mother stepped out of the car. She was clearly confused. I don't understand," she said. "Why are we here?" Keanu looked at her and bowed his head slightly. "Because your son reminded me of who I was before the world got too loud. I want to show him something." They followed him into the garage, and what they saw made both of them stop in stunned silence. The inside was like a miniature workshop. Clean, quiet, filled with motorcycle parts, tools, sketches, and framed photos on the wall. Every inch of it told a story, not just of machines, but of craftsmanship, care, and soul. It wasn't a showroom. It was a sanctuary. Keanu led them to a corner where a small bike was halfway assembled, a special-sized motorcycle frame, not a toy, not full-sized either, but something in between. He pointed to it. "This," he said softly, "is the beginning of your real dream. I'm going to help you build it." Liam stared, speechless. "Not just today," Keanu continued, "but over time. You'll come here when you can. Learn. Use your hands, your patience, your heart. It'll take months, maybe longer, but when it's done, it'll be yours. Not because someone gave it to you, but because you earned every part of it." Liam's mother covered her mouth, tears already forming in her eyes. "And the money?" Liam asked quietly. Keanu nodded. "You'll use it. Every coin. But not to buy the bike, to buy the bolts, the screws, the polish, the oil. You'll learn what every piece means, and in the end, that jar won't just be spare change. It'll be a story." For the first time, Liam felt something bigger than excitement. It was pride, the kind that makes your chest feel heavy in the best way. He stepped forward, placed the jar on the table, and looked at the tools hanging neatly on the wall. "When do we start?" Keanu grinned. "Right now." And so they did. Keanu rolled up his sleeves. He taught Liam how to hold the wrench, how to feel the weight of the metal, how to check each part not just for size, but for purpose. They worked side by side, slow and steady. Liam's mother sat nearby, watching her son laugh more than she had seen in years. There were no cameras, no reporters, no grand announcements, just a boy, a man and a bike slowly becoming something more than a machine. And just before the sun began to set, Keanu pulled out a small plaque and handed it to Liam. "When it's done," he said, "you'll screw this into the frame." Liam read the engraving, "Built with heart, one piece at a time. Liam's ride." He looked up at Keanu. "Thank you." Keanu nodded, kneeling beside him. "Just promise me something." "What?" "One day when you see another kid staring at something behind a window, you'll remember this moment, and you'll be the one who shows up." Liam didn't hesitate. "I promise." And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. A legacy not of fame or fortune, but of kindness passed down like a spark. And it was only the beginning. The boy, the bolts, and the breaking point, the weeks that followed became the most important in Liam's young life, not because of sudden success or attention, but because of the rhythm he found, a rhythm that wrapped itself around the sound of turning wrenches, the smell of engine oil, the clink of bolts being sorted into tiny glass jars, and the quiet, thoughtful voice of a man who had once lived in the spotlight, but now chose something slower, something real. Every Saturday, Liam would ride with his mom out to the workshop just off Highway 18. He would carry his now empty scratched jar, not to fill it again with coins, but to repurpose it into a container for spark plugs, washers, and small notes that Keanu would leave behind with short lessons written in soft pencil like, "Tighten with trust, not fear," or, "If a part doesn't fit, maybe it's not broken. Maybe it's just misunderstood." Liam was changing, though it didn't show in the ways the world usually measured. He didn't wear new clothes, didn't suddenly become popular, and he certainly didn't have the shiniest toys. But something inside him had started to bloom. He stood straighter. He spoke with more thought. He smiled without flinching. His hands, once small and unsure, now held tools with confidence, learning the purpose of each part and how it fit into the bigger machine, a lesson he began to carry into life itself. Keanu would let him make mistakes, guiding him only when necessary. He never corrected with impatience, never scolded. And that silent grace gave Liam the courage to keep trying, even when a bolt stripped or a piece refused to fit. But the world, outside the workshop, wasn't always as kind. At school, Liam still sat alone during lunch. The other boys talked about video games, viral videos, and gadgets he'd never afford. When they asked what he did on weekends and he said he was building a motorcycle, most of them laughed. One boy in particular, Mason, seemed to take pleasure in mocking him. "You mean a toy bike?" he'd sneer. "What's next? You gonna ride it to Hollywood and be best buds with Superman too?" Liam didn't respond. Not because he was afraid, but because he'd learned that some people throw words like stones. Not because of who you are, but because of what they haven't found in themselves. Still, the laughter stung. Not for the insults themselves, but for the loneliness that always followed. One Friday afternoon, Mason went too far. Liam had brought a photo to school, one that Keanu had taken of him holding a wrench, his hands covered in grease, standing beside the half-finished bike. It wasn't for show. He'd just wanted to look at it during lunch, to remind himself that even if he didn't fit in, he was part of something bigger. But Mason saw it, snatched it, and waved it around. "Look, everyone." Liam and his imaginary friend. "Hey, maybe the motorcycle talks too." The others laughed. The photo was passed around like a joke. Liam tried to reach for it, but Mason pulled it away, finally tossing it onto the muddy ground outside the cafeteria. It landed face down, soaked and bent. Liam stood there frozen, staring down at the image now ruined by ridicule and rain. He didn't cry, not in front of them. But inside, something cracked. When he got home that evening, he didn't speak. Not during dinner. Not when his mom asked if he was okay. He just went to his room and sat on the floor, staring at the empty jar he used to save his money in. He had repurposed it with pride. Now it just looked like another glass reminder of something that didn't belong. But the next morning, he still showed up to the garage. Keanu noticed something immediately. Not in Liam's posture or words. He hadn't said much, but in the way he handled the tools. Slower, heavier, distracted. "Rough week?" Keanu asked gently. Liam shrugged, avoiding his eyes. "Just school." Keanu nodded slowly, then stepped back, wiped his hands with a cloth, and sat on an overturned crate. "You want to tell me about it?" Liam hesitated. Then the words came, out in a whisper. "They laughed at me, called it fake, said you weren't real, that the bike was just something I made up to feel important." Keanu didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch, not to avoid the pain, but to honor it. Then he said, "You know, when I was your age, I used to walk into bookstores and read about people who changed the world. Inventors, writers, explorers. Not because I wanted to be famous, but because I didn't feel like I belonged. And when people laughed at me, I'd remind myself, they can laugh at what you're building until the engine roars." Liam looked up. But what if it never roars? Keanu stood, walked over, and gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Then you keep building, because even if no one hears it, you will, and that's enough." They returned to work, but this time Keanu showed him how to grind a new piece from scratch, not using pre-made parts but shaping something unique. "This part," he said, holding the raw metal, "wasn't made for the bike. but we'll shape it to fit. Sometimes the best pieces are the ones that had no place, until you made one. Liam's hands moved with care. Sparks flew as they shaved, shaped, and smoothed the piece into something usable. By the end of the afternoon, it slid perfectly into the frame, a small silver connector that no one else would notice, but that Liam had forged with his own hands. They didn't speak much after that. The silence was comfortable, earned. Liam stayed late, cleaning the shop without being asked, reorganizing the bolts in the scratched jar, now filled with more than coins. It held a lesson. It held proof. But before he left, Keanu handed him something wrapped in cloth. "What's this?" Liam asked. "Open it when you get home," Keanu said with a smile. That night, Liam sat on his bed and unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a frame, and within it, a new photo. Keanu had taken it while Liam worked, hands covered in grease, eyes focused, mouth set in quiet determination. Below it, a note was handwritten. "They can laugh at the dream, but they can't unbuild the truth." Liam placed it beside his bed. Not for anyone else to see. Just for him. Because some victories aren't about being seen. They're about knowing you're worth seeing. And the next Monday, when Mason tried to mock him again, Liam didn't look away. He didn't fight. He didn't run. He simply said, "You can say what you want, but I know what I'm building." And for the first time, Mason had no comeback. When the wheels stopped turning, the skies above the town had started to change. Clouds hung lower than usual, thick with the scent of cold air and coming rain. Streets were quieter now, and even the laughter that once spilled from playgrounds seemed softer, dulled by a sense of something unseen but felt. The kind of heaviness that doesn't come from the weather, but from the weight of unspoken things. Liam still went to the garage every Saturday, still polished the frame of the half-built bike with his hands, still held each tool like it had a soul. But something in him had shifted. The confidence Keanu had carefully nurtured inside him, the calm way he carried himself even when the world didn't understand, had started to flicker. Not because of the bullies or the long days at school. No, this time the crack came from home. His mother had stopped smiling the way she used to. She still made pancakes on Sunday mornings, still packed his lunch with care, still asked about school with soft eyes. But the weight behind her words had grown heavier. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter like unfinished conversations. The electricity flickered more often. The heater coughed in the mornings. And her phone calls, once quiet and brief, had become longer, more tense. Liam had heard the word eviction more than once, whispered like a curse. One evening he caught her sitting at the edge of the couch, holding her head in her hands. The old blue envelope from the landlord lay open beside her. She didn't see him standing there in the hallway, clutching a worn towel, pretending to head to the sink. She just wept silently, the way people do when they've run out of strength but don't want anyone to know. And in that moment, Liam felt something collapse inside him. Not the kind of collapse that shouts or screams, but the kind that just lets go. Quietly. The next day at school, he didn't look anyone in the eye. He sat alone again. Not by choice this time, but because he didn't know how to carry the ache in his chest. And when the final bell rang, he didn't walk toward the bus like usual. Instead, he turned down the back path that led to the garage. He didn't tell his mother. He just needed to be somewhere that didn't feel like it was falling apart. Keanu was already inside, tightening bolts on a different bike. When he saw Liam step through the door, he didn't speak at first. He just watched. Watched the way the boy's shoulders slumped, how his eyes seemed dimmer, how his hands weren't reaching for the usual tools. "You're early," Keanu said softly, wiping his hands. Liam didn't answer. "You want to work on the frame?" Liam shook his head. Keanu set the wrench down, walked over, and sat on the edge of the workbench. "What's going on?" Liam took a deep breath, then another, but the words didn't come out right away. He pulled the empty jar from his backpack and placed it on the table. "We might lose the apartment," he said finally. "Mom's trying, but the landlord's mad. She's working extra. barely sleeps. She doesn't know I know, but I hear everything. I hear her cry, and I don't know how to help. Keanu leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. His face didn't show pity, just understanding. Deep, quiet understanding. So I think, Liam continued, voice trembling, I think I can't come here anymore. I can't let her drive me. And I can't ask you to help if we can't even keep our home. Keanu was quiet for a long time. Then he stood up and walked to a cabinet near the wall. He opened it, pulled out an old canvas bag, and returned to Liam, setting it gently on the bench. Then he sat back down. You know, Keanu began, my mom raised me on her own too. We didn't have much. When the fridge was empty, she'd make a meal from crackers and ketchup and say it was magic soup. When I couldn't afford movie tickets, she'd draw fake ones and sit beside me while I acted out the film. She gave me everything she could, even when she had nothing. Liam looked up, surprised. But you're famous, you're rich now. Keanu smiled, but there was no pride in it, only reflection. Rich in money, sure, but money doesn't fix everything. It doesn't bring people back. It doesn't heal loss. And it certainly doesn't protect you from feeling helpless. He gestured to the bag. Inside there's something for you. Not because you asked, not because you're in trouble, but because you've shown me something I'd forgotten. That sometimes the bravest thing in the world is to keep going, even when you don't know how. Liam opened the bag. Inside was a simple envelope, sealed and heavy. He looked up, confused. What is this? Keanu's voice softened. Enough to cover 3 months' rent, and a job offer for your mom, at a production studio in town. She's a hard worker. She deserves a break. Liam froze. But why? Because you believed, Keanu said. And when someone believes that deeply, the world needs to meet them halfway. Tears welled in Liam's eyes, but he blinked them back. I don't know how to thank you. You already did, Keanu said. By showing up, every week, every setback, you showed me that the things we build with our hands mean more when they're built from heart. Liam clutched the envelope, but not like it was money, more like it was proof that kindness still mattered. Later that evening, his mother stood in the kitchen staring at the letter and the offer written on official letterhead. She couldn't believe it. She asked Liam if it was real, if he was joking. And when she finally understood, she didn't speak. She just pulled him into her arms and cried the way people cry when the sky finally breaks and lets the sun through. And that Saturday, when they returned to the garage together, Liam noticed something new. The bike was closer to finished. And not just in frame or parts, but in meaning. It had become a symbol not just of what he could build, but of how people can carry each other without saying a word. Keanu handed him a wrench. We've got work to do. And together, they continued building. Not just a machine, but a legacy that no storm could break. The letter from before Liam was born. Saturday morning arrived slowly, the way certain mornings do when the air feels heavier with meaning than the day before. The clouds over the town were pale but calm, like a sky unsure of whether to rain or let the light break through. Liam woke up earlier than usual, not because he had to, but because something inside him had started to shift. The worry that once sat heavy in his chest had lightened over the past few weeks, ever since his mom got the studio job and the landlord backed off after the overdue rent had been quietly paid. The quiet dread in their tiny apartment had been replaced with something Liam wasn't used to, hope that stayed, a kind of hope that didn't disappear the next morning. But beneath that hope, there was also a question that had started to form, one he couldn't shake. Why had Keanu helped him so much? Liam knew about kindness. He knew how good people stepped in sometimes just because it was the right thing to do. But this felt deeper, more personal, like Keanu had been waiting for Liam, not just discovering him by accident. There were moments, the way Keanu looked at him, the way he listened, that didn't feel like a stranger helping a kid. They felt like recognition, like memory. He didn't know what it meant. Not yet. That morning, when he walked into the garage, he found Keanu sitting alone at the workbench, not touching any tools, not going through sketches or oil-stained notes. Instead, he was holding a letter. An old one. The envelope was yellowed at the corners and sealed with tape that had grown brittle with time. It looked like something that had waited a long time to be read. Keanu didn't speak when Liam entered. He simply looked up, his expression quieter than usual, as if he'd spent the whole night with ghosts. "You okay?" Liam asked, setting his backpack down. Keanu nodded slowly. "Yeah, just remembering something I thought I'd forgotten." Liam walked over, careful not to interrupt whatever was unfolding. He had come to respect silence in the garage, not the awkward kind, but the kind that carries weight. And this silence had that weight. Keanu finally spoke. "I found this letter last night, tucked inside an old book. I hadn't opened that book in years. It belonged to someone I lost." Liam sat down beside him, waiting. "Her name was Maya," Keanu said. "She wasn't famous. She didn't need to be. She was kind, wild, full of light. We were close. Really, close. Back when I was trying to figure out who I was. Before the world knew my name, she grounded me, reminded me that I was more than a role, more than a paycheck." His voice tightened, but he kept going. "She got sick. Sudden. Cruel. And she didn't make it. But before she died, she wrote me this. I couldn't open it then. I wasn't ready. But something about you, something about all of this, made me ready now." Liam looked at the letter. "What does it say?" Keanu opened it carefully. The paper inside was soft, creased, almost fragile. He unfolded it and began to read aloud. Not just for Liam, but for himself. "Keanu, if you're reading this, it means the pain has softened just enough to let memory breathe. I don't want this to be a letter about goodbye. I want it to be a letter about what comes next. You always said you'd never be a father, said you were too broken, too tired, too caught up in a world that moved too fast. But I saw something different. I saw the way you cared, the way you held space for people, the way you listened. Maybe you never have a child. Maybe you do. But someday you'll meet someone, a boy. He'll remind you of everything you used to be before life bruised you. And when he shows up, don't question it. Help him. Guide him. Not because he needs a hero, but because you do." Keanu stopped, reading. His hands trembled slightly, but he didn't wipe the tears that had formed in his eyes. Liam sat frozen, unsure of what he had just heard. It wasn't the letter alone. It was the way Keanu's voice changed when he read it. The way he kept glancing at him without fully saying why. And then the silence returned. Only this time it wasn't heavy. It was holy. Keanu folded the letter again and looked directly at Liam. "I think she was right," he said. Liam tilted his head. "About what?" "About meeting someone who'd remind me of everything I was before I got tired of hoping," Keanu said. "About someone who didn't need saving but who would end up saving me." Liam felt a lump in his throat. "You mean me?" Keanu nodded. "You came into my life like a whisper, Liam. Not loud, not demanding, but full of something most people forget, belief. And being around you, it reminded me what it feels like to build something with your hands and heart at the same time." Liam blinked, overwhelmed. I didn't know I was doing that." "You were," Keanu said. "And now I want to give you something more." He walked to the corner of the garage and opened a cabinet Liam had never seen unlocked before. Inside was a small metal case. Keanu brought it over and opened it. Inside was a certificate, notarized, stamped, and official-looking. Liam squinted at it. "What is it?" "It's a co-ownership agreement," Keanu said. "For the garage. From today forward, it belongs to both of us." Liam's eyes widened. "You mean, I own this place too?" "Not just the space," Keanu said, smiling. "The vision, the mission. We'll turn it into something more. Not just bikes, but mentorship. Programs for kids who feel like you did, like they don't fit in, like their dreams are too quiet for the world to hear." Liam sat back, stunned. "I don't know how to run anything." Keanu chuckled softly. "Neither did I. But we'll figure it out. Together. The rain began to fall outside, tapping gently on the windows. Liam stared at the paper, then at the bike frame, then at Keanu. For the first time, he understood that this wasn't just a garage anymore. It was a bridge between past and future, between grief and purpose, between a boy who once saved pennies in a scratched jar and a man who had spent years carrying a letter he couldn't bring himself to open. And now, the letter had delivered them both to something neither had expected: healing, where kindness leaves its blueprint. The town didn't change overnight, but something inside its people did. It started as a quiet rumor, the kind that passes from mother to teacher to barber, slipping through communities like a breeze through a cracked window. They whispered of a boy who built a bike with a movie star, not for fame or money, but with bolts of belief and grease-stained hands. They said a rundown garage on the edge of Highway 18 had come back to life. Not to sell engines or speed, but to teach something slower, something deeper. And at the center of it all was Liam, now 10, no taller than before, still wearing scuffed shoes and too long sleeves. But different. Not louder, not tougher, but brighter somehow. Steadier. Like someone who had found his place and didn't need to explain it. The garage reopened in early spring under a new name, Maya's Workshop, a name that meant nothing to strangers but everything to Keanu. The sign was made of reclaimed wood, carved by hand, sanded and painted by Liam himself with care in every letter. Below the name, in smaller font, it read, "Where hands build more than machines." The grand opening was never meant to be grand. There were no ribbons, no press, no red carpets, just people, neighbors, kids, volunteers. Some brought old tools, others brought stories. There were single moms like Liam's, wide-eyed children like he once was, and even a few tough teenagers who didn't know how to say thank you but showed up early to help sweep the floors. Inside the garage, the scent of sawdust mixed with oil, and instead of silence, the air was filled with voices, soft instruction, laughter, even a little music from a rusted speaker near the bench. Liam stood at the front with Keanu by his side. It wasn't a stage, just a patch of open concrete near the bike they had built together, now fully finished. It stood not as a centerpiece, but as a quiet reminder. The silver plaque glinted under the fluorescent light. Built with heart. One piece at a time. Liam's ride, Liam had learned to speak slowly, thoughtfully, like Keanu. And when the moment came to say something, he didn't hesitate. His voice was small, but steady. "I thought this would just be a bike," he said. "Something for me." But it turned into something for everyone. I didn't know people would care. I didn't know my story mattered, but I guess it does, and maybe yours does too. He paused, then looked around at the young faces, some of them nervous, some already curious about the wrenches and bolts spread across the tables. This place is for anyone who feels invisible, anyone who thinks dreams are too expensive, anyone who's ever had to wait to be seen. Keanu placed a hand on Liam's shoulder and said nothing. He didn't need to. The pride in his eyes spoke louder than words. Behind them, a wall had been transformed into a growing mural, not painted with brushes but with small handprints of every child who came through the doors. Each hand was signed with a name and a date, and above them all, in simple lettering, was the phrase that tied it all together. Not built for speed, built for meaning. In the weeks that followed, the workshop became more than a garage. It became a heartbeat. Liam came after school to help younger kids with their first builds. Birdhouses, soapbox cars, wooden boxes. He taught them how to measure, how to sand carefully, how to wear safety goggles with pride. But more than that, he taught them how to believe. He would tell the story of the scratched jar, the window with the red bike, the way it felt to watch his dream vanish and then turn into something better. He never named Keanu, not because it was a secret, but because the story didn't need a celebrity to shine. It needed truth. One Thursday afternoon, Liam noticed a girl sitting alone in the corner. She was maybe 7, her shoelaces untied, sleeves too long, eyes darting nervously. She reminded him of himself. She hadn't touched, any tools yet, just stared at the others from a distance. So he walked over, sat down beside her, and placed a small wooden block on the table. "Ever built anything before?" he asked. She shook her head. "Me neither," he said with a grin. "Until someone gave me a chance." Her eyes lifted. "What? If I mess up?" Liam shrugged. "Then we fix it, together." She smiled. Barely, but enough. And just like that, another story began. That night, as the last kid left and the lights in the garage dimmed, Liam and Keanu stood by the bike one last time. "You know," Keanu said, "this place. It's more than Maya imagined, it's more than I imagined." Liam looked up at him. "You think she'd be proud?" Keanu nodded slowly. "Yeah, but not because of what we built, because of who you've become." Liam walked over to the scratch jar that still sat on the shelf, now empty but never forgotten. It had been placed there as a reminder, not of what he lacked, but of what he had once carried. Belief. "I think it's time to pass it on," Liam said. He cleaned it gently, filled it with the first few dollars from the donation box, and placed a small sticker on the side that read, "For the next dream." And without a word, he left it on the front table, ready for the next child who walked in with nothing but a spark in their heart. Later that week, Keanu returned to Los Angeles, back to his work, his sets, the world that knew his name. But before he left, he gave Liam one last thing. A small, framed photograph of the two of them standing in front of the finished bike, smiling not like builder and mentor, but like family. On the back of the photo, in Keanu's handwriting, it said, "The best things we ever build are the ones we leave behind." Liam kept it by his bed right next to the toolbox his mother had bought him, the one with his name engraved on the "Will" side. And so the workshop lived on. Kids came and went. Bikes were built. Stories were shared. Tears were wiped away. Not every kid stayed. Not every story ended with a perfect engine. But every child left knowing they were worth showing up for. And Liam, the boy who once counted coins in silence, became the kind of person who gave others a reason to believe.